Here we are today, the red star up on the timeline and the screen here in 2022, and the city is reviewing the work that's been done, more Moss Park, all of those policies and strategies that I mentioned, and is going to build off of what we've heard to date through those previous processes. And again, here we are today gathering more local ideas and experiences. So today, between summer of 2022 through to the fall, the city is confirming the vision with the community. And then between for the park and the community recreation center. And then between fall and spring of 2023, the team is going to work on early design ideas that are going to be presented for feedback. So you'll be hearing from us about those as well. And then the final design and approvals are going to happen between winter and spring of 2023. And later construction procurement is anticipated for spring of 2024, with the actual construction of the community center taking place between spring of 2024 and fall of 2027, and then the actual park construction to follow between spring of 2027 to fall of 2027. So on the next slide, just want to provide some project context with respect to the previous project, the Moor Moss Park, highlighted in blue. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Moor Moss Park. It's the predecessor, and as mentioned, wrapped up in 2016, only reaching that feasibility and engagement phases. So it didn't progress beyond that. But for context and to understand the current project, the project we're talking about today, what the current process is based on are the findings and the work from Moor Moss Park. So working with that previous process. And for those who might not be familiar with that process, it did include the redevelopment of the John Innes Community Recreation Center, and it was also envisioned at the time to include social services co-located within the building. It was also envisioned at the time that the rec center would be located in another spot in the park, and that Moss Park arena would be redeveloped. The thinking at the time that there would be some improvements to the park spaces around these facilities. The overarching goal was to improve facilities, programs, create more welcoming, equitable buildings and spaces. But as mentioned, it didn't progress beyond that feasibility stage. Here we are, 2021. So up on the screen, what's highlighted in green in the table, the project picked back up and refocused to build off of those learnings from Moor Moss Park, but recalibrate for the current realities 5 years later. Yet still with the same goals to improve facilities, programs, services, and also create new welcoming, equitable, accessible buildings, spaces for all. But some differences between the two for today is that the project is solely led by the City of Toronto's Parks, Forestry and Recreation Division, and the Community Recreation Center still being redeveloped with a focus on recreation rather than social services. And the new building will be placed in the same location as it exists today. And the Moss Park Arena will remain. It won't be redeveloped, but there will be some remodeling of existing spaces around the arena. And rather than simple improvements to the park in this current project, there will be extensive improvements throughout Moss Park. So on the next slide here, we've illustrated 3 key project components, which our design team are going to review with you all shortly. The 3 components are major park improvements to Moss Park, a brand new community recreation center, and upgrades to the existing arena. Those are the 3 big things that are happening. The major park improvements are going to include extensive enhancements to the park, improvements to active and passive recreation and amenities, a focus on supporting equity-deserving groups in the park and through recreation programs, and a focus on integrating Indigenous placekeeping elements in the park and the improvements. Some key components of the new rec center are going to include a double gym, 2 pools, a multi-use community space, and finally, as mentioned, the project also includes upgrades to the arena, the exterior spaces. But central to all this work, and something I just want to highlight, improvements to park spaces, the community rec center are all going to be shaped by the input we collect from key community members, the public, folks like yourselves, and for the project that are going to take place throughout the coming months and throughout the phases of this project. I'm not going to read this slide, but this sort of lays out a lot of information for everybody, specifically about what is included. So more information. The previous one was sort of like a high level, like the key pieces that were going to be in the rec center and some key pieces for the park. These give you like some core details. And then there are specific elements that have been identified as open for influence and things that the public and key stakeholders can directly contribute to, like, what kind of park improvements, what kinds of programmings, opportunities to include certain types of relationships between uses. So we will be coming to you and sharing some ideas and gathering your insights as we go through this project to make sure we've got it right. Also, as I mentioned earlier, all of our slides will be up available, so don't feel like you have to digest all of this in this moment. We will make these slides available on the project website within a couple of days, so you're able to review this slowly and ensure you know what's to come in the future. With that, I'm actually going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand it over to David from the Planning Partnership to speak to the park improvements. David.
Great. Thanks, Nadia. I'm going to now speak to the park improvements, as was just pointed out. I'm going to share this presentation with Nancy Chater and Matthew Hickey. And just to start with, again, a bit of a visualization here of the timeline, so you get a sense of the of how long all of this is going to take. And I want to draw your attention to the park construction beginning in 2027 through 2029. This schedule also includes the Metrolinx station construction, so you can see how that's integrated. And in this next slide, you'll see the reason for some of that. At the bottom of the, actually just one back, Nadia. Just slide back to that, this diagram. Thank you. This diagram here, you can see the footprint of or a general footprint of the proposed community resource center, and next to it the staging area for that construction. So that's going to consume a certain percentage of the park during all of this. And then the little red box in the bottom corner is the proposed Metrolinx station, and the area outlined in red is the staging area that they need for that for that to take place. So as you can see, a good section of the park is going to be taken up for the construction of those 2 projects. There will be some park space that's preserved, however. Now I'm going to ask Matthew Hickey to speak to the site history slides.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. One of the things that we like to do when we start our projects, I should introduce myself as well. My name is Matthew Hickey. I'm with Two Row Architect. We're the Indigenous architects working with the Planning Partnership on this park, but also on some other parks within the city. One of the things that we like to do when we start our work, and maybe we can go to the next slide, is to really think about the context in which we're building, the idea of placekeeping, the idea of what's important to this place. And you can see in this diagram of the Toronto Harbor, or what we now call the Toronto Harbor, that this area of Moss Park was actually very close to the original 8 blocks that were developed here in the town of York. For us, we like to go back even further. What was here before settlers? What was here before Indigenous people were here? And really think about the natural systems, the waterways, the birds, the bees, the animals that were here, and really think about how we can start to honor those of our relations in a contemporary way in these new developments. Next slide. One of the other aspects of this site is really its relationship to the water and also its relationship to the Don River. And while it's not that close right now, at one point in time it was very close. And really understanding and thinking about the dynamic nature of these systems, how cities change over time, how land and water uses change over time, and really trying to honor and bring back some of the more natural processes to this place is another key aspect of our work. Next slide. Tuber also has worked with many of the Indigenous service providers that are here within the city. We see these people, these groups, as actually the keepers of this place as well, in the sense that they are the Indigenous people that are living and working, playing, learning, and using these facilities within the park. And this is a list of just a few of them, with some very important service providers such as Anishinaabe Health bordering right on the park as they are right now. Next slide. The other thing that we want to think about is, we are existing here in 2022, and this park needs to be used for the future. We have a post-contact history here, and there is a relationship that has been built, and this park has been used for years for civil uses, recreation, all these things that should be important for us to remember moving forward with this as well.
Great, thanks, Matthew. Now I'm going to speak just briefly to some of the planning context for the park itself. On the left side of this drawing is the Downtown Parks and Public Realm Plan, a very important document for park planning in this part of the city. You can see there on the diagram an idea that is embedded in this document, and that is that at the bottom end of the diagram on the left-hand side, you can see Moss Park, the armories in the kind of the center of the diagram of the park. At the top of the diagram, you can see Allen Gardens, and between those two, connecting them, is Pembroke Street, creating this kind of dumbbell with two parks on either end and Pembroke Street connecting them. And that's one of the kind of core principles of the next diagram over the Garden District Heritage Conservation Plan that identifies Moss Park in that overall composition. You can see the extent of it here. It also speaks to the important views from the park up Pembroke towards Allen Gardens, and the historic importance of Moss Creek that once flowed through this site, and importantly the First Nations land uses that Matthew spoke to earlier. Next. A view here on the right-hand side of the proposed Metrolink station, and you can just get a sense of that corridor, the cut through the park at the south end, where you see that Moss Park label there, the station box and construction of the line. Next. I'm going to ask Nancy to speak to this slide.
Good evening, everybody. The Reconciliation Action Plan has just been recently adopted by the City Council in April. Very important, groundbreaking document that is setting an action plan for all city divisions for the next 10 years. It's focused around 28 actions through 5 different themes to advance truth, justice, and reconciliation for the city and with Indigenous peoples and communities. And then one of those is really important for our parks and ravines, which is the Indigenous Placekeeping Initiative. And that is integral to the truth and reconciliation and justice process, because it creates and nurtures space in process and policy for ceremony, for teaching and community. It strengthens Indigenous connections with lands and waters, and builds cultural competency and capacity for land-based Indigenous engagement. The outcomes of placemaking and placekeeping in our parks are varied, but all are critical for the health and well-being of Indigenous peoples. So these are 2 really important documents under creating a ground for our project, for our park project, a grounding, I should say. Thank you, and back to, I think, David.
Great, thanks, Nancy. I'm now going to speak to some of our early observations, and I'd be interested in getting your feedback when we meet with you a little later on some of these. Just to begin with here, the first slide, setting in context, just giving you a sense of the size of this park, one of the largest in the southeast district of the city. Next slide. And importantly, when you look at that at Moss Park in the center of the diagram there, just a walking radius of 10 minutes beyond the park, 5 minutes beyond the park, and you can see within 10 minutes, you can reach 2 other large parks. Say Allen Gardens was mentioned earlier, David Crombie Park as well. a series of smaller parks in this area as well. But Moss Park does play a very important role in terms of you know, obviously of its size being one of the largest. Excuse the siren in the background. Next slide. Importantly, setting this park in terms of the programming of these other parks, and you can just see a list there. You can study this later after the meeting. One of the things you'll notice here that's missing from this list is Indigenous placekeeping, which is going to be something that you'll be seeing in, for example, Allen Gardens, David Crombie Park as it's redeveloped, and certainly Moss Park coming forward. Next. Off-leash dog areas. Of course, we all know that Moss Park has a combined off-leash dog area on the baseball diamond, and that's going to be changed in the future. We're going to be looking at a separated off-leash dog area that will be fenced and separate from other programming elements of the park. And you just get a sense there of the smattering of few of those off-leash dog areas in this part of the city. Next. And importantly, community gardening and related facilities that are evolving, again in the Southeast District, a whole collection in various parks. And importantly, Moss Park will continue to have a very vibrant community garden in the future and play an important role as it does today within this overall collection of gardens. Next. Just some early observations in terms of the park itself and some of the attributes that we'd like to maintain while the park is redesigned and developed. Of course, the entrance feature there off Shooter at Sherburne in the top left-hand corner. Just below that, the view up Pembroke, that green corridor we talked about earlier. The strong building frame around the park on Shooter Street. That's the view of those historic homes and buildings there that frame the park edge. Similar condition on Queen Street. And then this beautiful mature canopy of trees along Shooter, which are some of the best trees in the park that I'm sure all of you know well. Next. When we think about some of the big moves here for the park, I'm going to show you a few diagrams to get your opinion on a little later. Next slide. This is the beginning of a kind of organizational framework for the park. We're thinking that similar to today, that the kind of lawns and trees that frame the north edge of the park along Shooter, similarly at the south edge along Queen Street, would be maintained and certainly reinstated as passive parkland with a big open lawn in the center, and the programming of the more active programming of the park around that large lawn that could be programmed for many different things. Obviously, there's a very important relationship with some of the programming in the future CRC itself, the future community center. For example, the children's programming should be directly adjacent because of the interconnection between the two. Similarly with play courts, whereas other activities such as off-leash dog areas and tennis tend to function more independently. So there's a kind of relationship study that we're currently undertaking. Next. This is an idea, or the beginning of an idea about circulation in the park. We know that walking is really important, and we're thinking about different kind of circuits, walks throughout the park, different ways of connecting to these different facilities as well, and obviously to the community center itself, the arena, and the Metrolink station, and all the adjacencies and neighborhoods around. Next. I wanted to put this on the table for you to consider today. We know that there's certainly advantages that we're aware of in terms of the existing baseball function in the park, but it is a park that has a limited size. Baseball takes up a considerable amount of the park that you all know today. It does bring evening life to the park, but it's important to think about some of what, whether baseball should be maintained or whether or whether we should consider other uses here. And these are some of the reasons or some of the issues that have come up through previous consultation processes, and we'd like to get your feedback on them. Next.
Now we'll switch to talk about the Community Recreation Center. I'm Chris from the architecture team, and I, along with Victor and Krista, will just go over with you what we know now about that building. We'll return to this site plan just in the first instance. The community center is the white square with the dark black outline in the top right of the diagram. What do we know now? It is early days, but we do know that the new community center will be constructed on the footprint of the existing one, and we'll attempt to try to create the most compact footprint possible to basically maximize tree retention on the site and maximize available parkland.
So we presented several options to the technical user group based on the required programming. A variation on the first option is preferred because it allows for pool and change rooms to be accessible from the ground floor lobby. Again, think of these like it's all the floors stacked on top of each other. Option 2 is structurally more complicated to suspend a heavy pool filled with water over top of a gym, which was not preferred for both maintenance and cost. Option 3 limited both accessibility and light to the aquatics programming, and it was felt that basement programming at the site may not be particularly desirable. And option 4, coming back to the park, would have created a very flat pancake, which would have taken out a lot more trees and would have affected some of those pathways that are existing on the site. So down at the bottom, you can see the revised option 4, which stacks the pool and gym on top of each other. Those are connected by fitness and change rooms. And there's a lobby, which could be an atrium space closer on the left-hand side of the diagram, which would also give you access to the roof terrace, as well as those multi-purpose rooms. Next slide.
The great opportunities of building next to a park is to really let a community building and all of its public rooms open onto community green space. A fantastic opportunity. Next. The possibility for a community gathering place under a communal or civic veranda is a fantastic way to connect indoors and outdoors. Next. Here at the Pam McConnell Center, the kind of openness of universal change rooms really equals safety, cleanliness, transparency, and ease of operation. And this really has become the City of Toronto PF&R standard for safe change rooms in their facilities. At our Wellesley facility, a great lesson learned was about opening large public rooms and public activity onto the street and really engaging people and promoting participation here with the library and also the gymnasium. Swimming pools are a special program component. Lots of options that we can talk about in terms of the water depths and toys. It's also about natural light, a non-glare safe natural light, and a balance of public view and privacy for the bathers.
As Krista illustrated earlier in those sectional diagrams, we reviewed pool placement options with the technical planning committee, and at grade was preferred by that committee for safety, accessibility, and connection to exterior programming. And likewise for the gymnasium, again, to minimize the building footprint, we're looking to place it over the pool, up on the basically what becomes a third story. And that allows us to maximize access to daylight, natural light, and views out over the park and over the tree canopy.
So moving forward, we would love to hear from you what kind of features and amenities should be included in these program spaces. For example, which aquatic features you could have a movie night, spin class, there could be a climbing wall. Down in the lower left-hand corner, you can see a hydrotherapy pool. There's a bubble machine in the center or a water slide off to the far right. Next slide. And for the gym and fitness programming, if we're going to retain the existing weight room and bring it to this facility, would we also provide treadmills? We would provide spaces that would allow for various community programming. The bottom two on the left, well, the left and the center, would be just about connecting views within the spaces to other activities that are going on, and again, views back out to the park. And the final slide, final image on the right would just be, could there be potential for rooftop programming? Next slide. And for the multi-purpose room programming, there, you can see at the top, there's a community kitchen and a cafe, a multi-purpose room, which could potentially have access out to the rooftop. And if we are going to retain the existing wood shop and bring it to this facility, would that be combined with a maker space? Or should these two be located within close proximity to each other? There's lots of programming potential, whether it's maintained or reimagined, can be discussed through this process.
Thanks so much, folks. So next, going to quickly just review with everyone some key information and what we've heard to date from stakeholders and from the public. So overall enthusiasm about facilities park redevelopment, interest how the redevelopment is going to be able to balance needs of local versus regional users, concern about disruption, displacement of services during construction are some of the things we've heard. Food security we've heard should be an important consideration and is an opportunity for community building. We've heard very clearly a desire for more open, accessible park and a community recreation center that is welcoming to everyone, desire for more flexible multi-use spaces for different activities. Safety is very clear priority for everyone we've been connecting with, including that of vulnerable populations and those experiencing homelessness. We've heard very clearly that the redevelopment must continue to include Indigenous people organizations to help shape the program and the design. Current park users, folks want them to feel welcome and able to use the park and the rec center in the future. And the engagement process itself for the development for this project needs to be proactive, actively engage folks, the public, stakeholders. You want to be spoken to directly through appropriate channels. And this includes reaching out to unhoused communities and Indigenous communities in a variety of appropriate and sensitive ways. What's going to make this project successful? The city's determined that the redesign of the park and the 70-year-old community recreation center needed to serve evolving needs, both a high concentration of vulnerable and equity deserving populations in the local area, as well as meet the needs of many new community members and to support the area's future population growth. But we also know that the center and the park will serve as a gathering place for many different people, communities, experiences. So the project will be a success if the diversity of community members who use the park and the community recreation center today, as well as those future community users who might not be here just yet, they feel interested, they feel welcome, safe to use these amenities in the future. So briefly, I'm going to just share some details with everyone about how the public, yourselves, rights holders, key stakeholders are going to be participating and providing input to shape this work. What are our engagement goals for the project? We want to be equity focused, trauma informed and collaborative, deliberative, transparent, and creative in how we engage folks. We want to make sure we're communicative throughout the whole process and grassroots. We want to be digital like tonight as well as in person, so balancing both and flexible and open with how we connect throughout the process. So next up on the screen is the anticipated engagement timeline for the project for the next 10 months or so. As is depicted, the project's phase 1 began in 2021 when the city set the stage for the project and issued notice of the project starting and began to lay some groundwork, hired the consultant teams, and undertook some initial stakeholder interviews. Today, as mentioned, and throughout summer of 2022, we're in phase 2 of the project as we explore how things have changed since 2015, reconfirm and better understand the evolving local issues and how the project can support local needs. In phase 2, we're also going to be confirming the project's vision, its core principles and big moves, what we'll talk about tonight. There are core engagement activities for phase 2 to do so. That includes today's meeting, and we're hoping that you will contribute to these big moves discussion and principles today. We, in addition to the big moves, we also, Trina Moyen-Bell on our team is leading ongoing grassroots Indigenous engagement work, which began in May of 2002 and will continue and be ongoing throughout each phase of the project. We also have, and I'll speak to it in a moment, a local advisory group and project champions who are supporting these projects. These are key community members, your peers, who have joined us and are helping to inform the project on an ongoing basis and meeting with us on an ongoing basis. We're also in the process of planning pop-ups in the park and local school engagement activities for the upcoming school year. In phase 2, we are also going to be, scheduling additional meetings and having a survey that's out right now. So we'll make that accessible to you folks shortly. In this meeting, it's gone live today, so you have time and up until July 3rd to fill out the phase 2 survey. And then we'll be coming back and providing a summary to everybody, as I mentioned, so you folks know what we're learning in phase 2. Then we'll be moving on to phase 3 in fall of this upcoming fall, and it's going to go until spring of 2023. So the plan is that the project team is going to learn what we use in phase 2 to start developing ideas for the park and amenities and concepts for the new community recreation center. So the idea is that we will have our next sort of public meeting for phase 3 in the fall, and ongoing discussions with the local advisory group, the project champions, Indigenous community members and local folks, and schools and pop-ups. So we'll be having these ongoing meetings and then coming to the public as well in each phase. And then our final phase in phase 4 is set for spring of 2023, at which time the design team will be refining and working on final plans and designs for the park and the rec center. And again, all the design work is going to respond to what we are learning through each of our engagement moments. And the team is going to be iterating and refining based on what we learn from the local advisory groups, the project champions, Indigenous folks we meet along the way and are engaging with, and of course the public, and that'll all sort of rally and come together in that final design set out for phase 4. So a little bit more about our advisors. We have sort of some core project advisors that are meeting with us frequently in between and around these project public meetings. We have a local advisory group, and I'm going to speak a little bit in a moment, but that's made up of core local stakeholders, folks that actually went through an adapted civic lottery model application process to join the team as advisors, and these are paid positions. And folks on as a part of the local advisory group are made up of local residents, members of local businesses, local service providers, community groups, organizations, all within the vicinity of the park. We also have project champions that are community leaders. They're actually are acting as like sort of peer-to-peer researchers and helping us connect with people and communities not often included in formal planning processes, not often those who come to meetings, who would come to a public meeting like tonight or even join a local advisory group. But these are folks who can connect with those folks and are joining our team and will be taking our questions and essentially going out and connecting with community and then bringing that information back and helping to deepen our understanding and making sure that we're connecting with as many people and not those who have the time and resources and whatnot to be able to show up to meetings. As mentioned, we're going to be consulting with and have already started the consultation with local rights holders and will continue to do that every phase of this project. And as mentioned, I'll provide some details shortly. We also have a grassroots Indigenous process that Trina on the process team is leading and has been started already and will again continue throughout the project. And of course, city staff, they're advising us. You've heard about a couple folks already on the team. Oh, we've got a technical group of people. So there's staff and lots of meetings behind the scenes and making sure that it's meeting all the requirements with respect to policies, technical requirements, and aligning with broader strategies and initiatives that the city has underway. So just a little bit of details about that local advisory group. How do we go about to get this core group of folks that are central, that are meeting with us before these meetings, reviewing our design work in advance? There was a large call out. We did invitations, mailers to over 9,700 addresses that included a call. Come and join the project team. We've got these paid opportunities to join in a variety of capacities, whether as a local advisory group member, a project champion, or there's an opportunity for design mentorship as a part of this process. So the city sent out over almost 10,000 invitations to join this. There was also a variety of social media that went out with respect to joining the process and joining as a community advisor in a variety of ways through Instagram and Twitter. Of those social media, 29,000 folks viewed that and got a chance to see the notification to join the project. We had an application that was out and live until May 20th, and we had 58 people complete the application to join the local advisory group. And then we went through an adapted civic lottery process. We had a series of criteria and targets that were based on ward census profiles, and we had specific targets with respect to how many youth of a certain age group or ages or race or sex, or certain criteria. So we had these targets with respect to how many. We had a target of 20 seats at the table, and a certain amount of broken down to reflect the makeup of the community based on ward census profile. And then we started with various criteria to make sure that who we aligned with at the end actually mirrors the makeup of the community when it comes to race, gender, age. And then we made sure to add a variety of perspectives when it comes to use of Moss Park, such as, folks who use the woodshop or arena or interest in the pool or sporting activities, to make sure that the group not only reflected what the community is like, the makeup of the community, but also the interests and uses of the park. And right now we've gotten down to 17 folks. And how does that break down a little bit, just to give you a sense here up on the screen? With respect to those 17 resident members, a breakdown you can see up on the screen of approximately 53% identify as female, 29% as male. So that's cis female, cis male. About 12% identify as non-binary trans, and 6% as two-spirit. Age range breaks out to be about 30% or just under 30%, 56 years old or older. 30 to 55 range is about 47% of our membership, and the youth range is 24, but a quarter of our membership. With respect to the breakdown of race, approximately 41% are white folks, and 59% identify as non-white. With respect to organizations, you can see up on the screen who's represented. The Garden District Residents Association sits on the local advisory group, Sojourn House, Building Roots, folks from Metrolinx, Walk Toronto, and we're looking to add both more organizations to make sure that we have a real breadth and depth of local organizations who are on the local advisory group, as well as adding additional Indigenous communities and folks who are already on there, but ensuring that we're having more voice on that committee as well. Project champions, as I mentioned, paid community leaders, peer-to-peer researchers is a way of thinking about it and bringing folks in. The goal of the champions: connect with communities who don't often participate with a specific focus. As an example, how can we connect with people experiencing homelessness, communities who English might not be their first language? Can we connect with somebody who is connected to be able to bring those? And actually, they're joining the team. It's effort and honor their time through an honoraria. Currently, we've identified 4 project champions, and we're meeting with additional folks, and we'll be adding in the coming weeks. So we're looking to expand our local community member to community member research team. And I mentioned earlier, Indigenous engagement led by Trina on the process team. The idea is to connect locally. Of course, the city is leading nation to nation ongoing relationships and consultation with treaty holders. That's been happening for some time now. But we also want to make sure that we're connecting with local Indigenous folks and organizations. Matthew shared a screen earlier of how many local organizations are serving the local Indigenous community. And so Trina has been speaking with local agencies, grassroots organizations who are providing services, inviting folks directly to join the local advisory group or project champions, or if there are youth who would like to join the design mentorship, and building relationships and basically asking the questions in a one-to-one. Through those processes, those organizations are also connecting Trina to local residents who are Indigenous, and then we're doing one-on-one conversations and connecting with them directly about the project as we are going through all of these meetings, as we're meeting with the LAG. So we're doing very much grassroots one-to-one connecting. Who should we talk to? Bring the questions forward, bring the information to the team. I think this is a great place to pause. I know we have asked you all to add questions to the Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second here. But we've shared a heck of a lot of information with you. Before we get into a discussion about, because our plan for the remainder of the time is to answer your questions and then get into a discussion about some of the, we're going to present some big principles, the design principles for the project and big moves. But before that, let's answer some of your questions. So I'm just going to second here, organize myself so I can see the questions that have come in.
Have questions that have come in through the Q&A, but we do have a hand up, and yes, encouraging folks to put their hand up and we'll start answering or asking you to unmute.
Fantastic. And to unmute is *3, folks. The first hand up I see is actually a phone number, 416-971. If you want to press *3 to unmute yourself and jump on in to ask your question. I think I just unmuted you. Come on in, say hello.
Hello?
Hi. How are you doing?
Okay.
Do you have a question for the team?
So I can't see the actual diagrams, but by you saying it's on the same footprint, I assume that means that the diagonals of the park will still remain open. That is, there will not be any buildings at the four corners. I hope that's the case. I mean, I know that people like dog areas, but fenced-off areas of a park are in some ways excluded from the park. So I think that also has to be placed in the same way as the buildings, as to not obstruct the diagonals or the center of the park. So hopefully you've done that. You do seem to be saying that it's the same footprint. That's sort of my main concern, is the overall design and location.
Yeah. No, appreciate the thoughts and the question, the concern, and maybe I'll ask David from the landscape architecture team. The four corners, are we keeping them clear? Any ideas? And MGMA also as well. What's happening in the four corners? Any sort of major big moves planned for the four corners? Are we in terms of right now the desire lines coming across and sort of the paths from those four corners in? And then if you want to provide any comment on fences in parks and dog off leash areas and dividing up parks, and any sort of thoughts on that.
First, to start off with, in terms of access into the park and the various park, people do obviously on streets approach a park like this from its corners, so they really are critical in terms of those gateway moments, and we definitely are thinking about those as main kind of access points, as well as several others around the park, to ensure that it's open and welcoming to everyone passing by. We also are very much aware that some of the programming of the park, like for example the off-leash dog area, even the community gardens, really to some degree the children's play area, they are in themselves kind of single use, and we really do need to think about ensuring that it's easy to walk around those kinds of facilities, that they don't or that they don't interrupt the patterns of movement through the park. And in terms of the off-leash dog area, we are looking at a standard that is a kind of smaller City of Toronto standard. So we're not going to consume a large area of the park with a facility like that. Whereas children's play areas, for example, would be we'd certainly want to make sure that there's ample room for those kinds of activities. So it is a bit of a balancing act, frankly, because we only have so much space. But I did mention earlier the baseball diamond, which in my mind is a kind of single use, and I think that's one of the things that we'd like to talk to you about in more detail as well.
Thank you, David. Folks, I'm going to go between hands and what has come through the chat so we can just balance a little bit between the two. There was a question that came through the chat. What happens to an approved city project if the funds are unexpectedly used to deal with contingencies like COVID? Are those projects rescheduled, or they may be, pushed away, canned after government changes? So that's, I think, a city question. So I wonder if Suzanne, great. Take that one for us.
Okay, so the funding for this project is earmarked specifically for this project, for the John Innes Community Recreation Center rebuild and the Moss Park improvement. So money will not be reallocated to other projects or other causes. It's specific to this project, and this project will be proceeding.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm going to take another hand. The next hand up I saw was Waleed. If you would like to unmute yourself, Waleed, and jump on in. So that would be, I'm going to try to unmute you, Waleed. 1 second, if I can do that. I don't think I can. Or *3, Waleed should be able to unmute you. Yes, we can. Hello, hello.
Excellent. Yeah, my question, and thank you so much for the presentation earlier. Very detailed presentation. A lot of thought has gone into it, I can tell. And I know a lot of folks in the community have been waiting, have been patiently waiting for improvements to one of the few facilities in their community that they could access recreation. So thank you so much for being very diligent in the planning piece. My question is more with regards to access to local residents. So, when we build things in our community, sometimes we forget that folks from all over the city have access to these spaces, which leads to a lot of problems when it pertains to residents who need those spaces for primary recreational uses, especially TCHC residents, Toronto Community Housing residents living at 275, 285, 295 Shooter. All those buildings require those access. And I know in Regent Park, we learned from that experience with the Pam McConnell Aquatic Center, where we looked at policies at the city level to improve access to local residents. So my question is, has any thought been put into access for local residents, and how does that look like? So that's my first question. My second question is with regards to local employment. So, we've always looked at a community benefits approach to development, making sure that the community benefits and that the wealth remains in the community. And the city has passed the community benefits framework, which outlines, minimal standards when it comes to local hiring. What does that commitment look like for local hiring? What's the percentage, right? And that's what I'm very interested in, is what's that percentage look like? So if you can answer those questions, I'll be really appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you, Waleed. Very clear. I think the first one we're going to send to Kathy. Kathy, how do we balance, or how are we considering local use of facilities versus folks who might be traveling in to use? How does the city think about that? And then we'll come back to the community benefits question.
Just to introduce myself, I'm Kathy Vincelli, the Manager of Community Recreation for Toronto East York. So thank you for those questions. It's always, a conversation about local access versus folks from, outside the local neighborhood. Our policies, do permit anyone from anywhere in the city to attend any program at any of our community centers. That being said, in some instances, we try to offer some locally driven programs. And I'll use our home ice hockey program as an example. That's a program that we really want to sort of involve local community, and it's open only to local community. So there are opportunities like that. We also have a pilot going on at Penn McConnell that Andrea might be able to speak to about local access to some of our swimming programs. Excuse me. So there are some instances where we can drive local programming, but in general, regular programming is usually open to all members of community, whether they live in or around the community or not. But that being said, we find that most participation comes from the local community. We see that 70% approximately do come from the local community. So it's a tough question to sort of confirm, but we can, work with community on providing local programs that are open just to the local area in some instances. So that's something that we can discuss at a later point. And then the other one on local hiring, similarly, we try to promote locally. We want people to come to work for us locally. It's easier for them to work if they live in the area, but it really, they have to go through our regular hiring process. And we promote locally to get those folks to apply. We try to get local residents to join our leadership programs and then sort of steer them into our hiring program. But it's not something we can guarantee. There's a process, there's a competition process that we have to follow. But generally we do like to have those hired locally because they're right there, right? It's easy access for them, and it's great to have them working in their community. I can't provide a percentage. That's a tough thing to do, just because we have certain policies, hiring practices that, make it open to all. So it's a tough question to answer in terms of a percentage. Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you've really, spoken very well to that, Kathy. Waleed, I think we work together on the access to recreation team through the Regent Park Aquatic Center and the Regent Park Community Center. So it's nice to see you here tonight. I think what Kathy is saying, and agree, is, there's certainly opportunities, as you've seen from the Regent Park or Pam McConnell pilot, for hyper-local access to our recreation spaces. Unfortunately, it's not something where, we could, so to speak, like close out or restrict access from other residents within the city. It is very challenging, as Kathy spoke to. So we can work with the community on pieces around hyper-local programming. With respects to prioritizing local hiring, as Kathy had mentioned, we definitely want people from the community to work at our centers. It's better for everybody. People coming in from the facilities see familiar faces. Staff are familiar with the residents in the community, and that creates a better bridge and better programming for everybody. But as Kathy said, again, we can't always guarantee that. We do offer programs, hyper-local programs, especially within recreation. We love to target youth to have them come and work in our programs. But again, it all depends on who applies to these programs and, if they have interest in working in these communities or in this facility. Some people may not, unfortunately, but again, it's something that we can work with later on. So I hope that answers your question. And thank you for your time.
Just one thing to add to that, we also have a program called Building Skills Through Recreation, which is, a leadership program to build those leaders. And we really try to promote locally through the staff at the centers in the area to create, those workshops and programs locally. So that's another sort of avenue for those who live locally to get involved and be part of those programs. And, we are looking to hire, we need people, we need folks. So we look for as many people as we can find, especially locally, to be in those programs and, get certified to be, part of our staff team.
It's so true. And this process itself, thank you both, Andrea and Kathy, really great details there. And just to reiterate, this process itself is also committed to sort of local, supporting the local community, hiring, so to speak, local advisory. These are paid positions to join the local advisory group, to join the project champions. There's still space. We're trying to make sure that so Waleed, if you know some really keen voices and folks who should be a part of the process, there is still some space. space, and we're gonna you can check out the project website for more information. I am going to transition us folks to get into the draft principles and big moves. We want to present them and then get into the discussion with you before the end of the evening. But we do want to commit. I know there are a couple of hands up. I acknowledge. I see you, Andre, Matthew. I'm not going to call on you, but any question we haven't answered, if you drop it in the chat, we're going to be doing a meeting summary. So we're going to commit to answering anything that's dropped in the chat in our meeting summary. So please, Andre, Matthew, drop your questions in there, and we will. You'll see that up on the project website very soon. So I'm going to share a screen again, folks, and then we'll get into just presenting our draft principles and big moves before we get into a breakout group to discuss them. Okay, can you see up a very green screen? Okay. What are the project's draft design principles? So what are the key, what is sort of basing, what is the project team basing a lot of their work on? What are they trying to ensure happens? We want to ensure the design of the community recreation center and park supports equity, belonging, and inclusion. We want to ensure that the community recreation center and park are accessible to all people. We want to create a space that makes safety for all users a priority. We want to design an open, permeable, and transparent environment. We want to maximize, enhance, and improve green spaces. We want to celebrate and share information about the Indigenous history and character of Moss Park. We want to contribute to food security and be sustainable and carbon neutral. So we're going to break out soon and talk about these. We want to see if these draft design principles, if they resonate for you, if you think we've got it right or we're missing anything here. So we're going to break out in discussion and talk about these in a moment. And what are our big moves? So some of these are the 12 big moves that the team is thinking about. We maintain a large open area parkland, a large area of open parkland with frontages onto Queen and Shooter by building the new CRC, the new Community Recreation Center along Sherbourne Street over the existing footprint. So that's 1. 2, establish a cohesive design language between the Community Recreation Center and the arena, and in a strong relationship between both buildings in the future Moss Park station, the Metrolink station. We want to optimize opportunities for rooftop access to the new Community Recreation Center. We want to incorporate some of the big move ideas is to incorporate spaces for prayer and ceremony. Another big move that is under consideration, ensure washroom access from the outside of the building. So not only inside, but also directly from the outside. Integrate Indigenous placekeeping throughout the park. Establish a renewed urban canopy of trees on Queen Street to match the Shooter edge. Maintain and enhance key pedestrian pathways and access points into the park. Maintain and enhance existing permeable edges, park edges, and protect existing urban canopy along Shooter. Maintain the strong Sherbourne Street urban built edge and enhance the relationship between the recreation center, the arena, the park, and the Metrolink station, and improve visual and physical connection and accessibility. A big move that we really want to hear from you. How do folks feel about removing the baseball diamond to accommodate a wider range of park uses? So we really want to hear that. And how about adding a fenced, dedicated dogs off-leash area to the park to support growing residents and dogs in the intensifying area?
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little bell notification. And don't forget to check us out on all our social medias. And if you want to see more, check our website.